Hello, my love, and welcome to today's video. I'm so excited for you to be here because we're going to be talking all things comparison. And my hypothesis is comparison and comparing yourself to others, making you feel anxious and perhaps a little bit frustrated with yourself in your life. I've had a lot of requests about comparison to talk about comparison because I know I make a few posts about it on Instagram and I talk a little bit about it, and I know it impacted me a lot when I had my eating disorders and things like that. And it was kind of an escape, right? It's like, okay, you compare yourself to someone, and it's like, okay, now I can look like her. So therefore, I will feel better about myself. And that's a complete lie because we are our own selves. And if we compare ourselves to another, even if we tried to have somebody else's body, even if we tried to have somebody else's life, the outcome would still not be the same. We wouldn't feel the same. We wouldn't act the same. We wouldn't have the same relationships. We can try all we want to have somebody else's life, somebody else that we see on Instagram, and it still won't happen. It still won't be the same outcome. So I think we need to be very adamant on how we filter things, the things that we see, because it's not all, everything that we see is not the whole story. So we need to be quite particular and, have our filter on, and the way that we see things, we need to be quite comprehensive when we see them, as opposed to thinking that everybody else has it perfect and ours is just kind of average or below average, right? So we need to really be very adamant when we go on social media and when we see it, when we hear about other people's lives, because it's not the reality. Like, that might not be the exact reality. And say, for example, if I go have a conversation with one of my friends or an acquaintance, I will see that their online life looks freaking amazing. It looks perfect. There's not a single flaw about it. Like, it looks like a little story, like a love story and things like that. And then I hear that it's actually completely different. I think we really need to be quite particular about the way we go about things and not just assume that everything else is perfect and your life is not so great. Okay, so we're going to go into it. I have my cup of tea here. I'm ready for the chat. It's not going to be a long one. But the question is comparison making you feel anxious? Because if it is, we need to look at what you're looking at every day, what you're exposing yourself to, what you truly believe about other people's lives. Do you kind of think that your life is not good because you see that others have more than you? Right. So we need to ask ourselves the right questions here. And we also need to see how you view your life, what you think about your life right now. Do you think that there is a lot of abundance in your life, or do you see it as like it's very scarce? There's nothing there for me to actually feel grateful for. We need to kind of tap into that. Are we being appreciative of what is already in our lives and how far we have come? Okay. And if you're at that point where actually things aren't great, well, then ask yourself, have I been working on my mindset? Have I been working on my health? Have I been working on the things that I actually want to work towards? And that's where satisfaction will actually come from. Satisfaction doesn't come from looking at somebody else's life, putting a comparison wall and being like, I want this, I don't have this. It doesn't work like that. Satisfaction comes from actually feeling fulfilled with what you're doing, the things that you have decided to do because you desire to do them, and feeling fulfilled and satisfied with your actions and behaviors, not what somebody else has selected for their lives. Okay, so we need to be very careful with that, with comparison. But let's just dive in, right? So I have a few points. Usually I don't prepare these episodes at all, but today I just had a little few points that I really wanted to dive into. So, number one, right? So, social media, in terms of Instagram, TikTok, whatever you go on. Personally, I only use Instagram. I don't use TikTok because I just feel like everything is really fast and everything is just very loud and just really fast. Like even the music, everything is just, it's so heightened. Like, it's just not for me, right? It doesn't help my meditation skills. I'll tell you that much. So in terms of social media, the way that you view relationships, the way that you see other types of bodies, whatever body expectations you feel there are, in terms of wealth, in terms of travels, do you realize that this is actually all the highlights of people's lives and not their day-to-day reality? So, what you're watching, in a way, is just like a perfect life magazine. So, when you step into Instagram, what are you going to see? What do you think you're going to see? Do you think you're going to see the really good stuff? Or are you going to see the daily things that just happen, the mundane things, perhaps an argument that happened, perhaps anything else that happened. Do you think you're going to see the bad side or the good side? And there, just kind of ask yourself that, because that's going to dictate how you feel when you step into the social media world. And just know, I think we're going to hone in on this point. Know that you're seeing highlights. Now, what are highlights? They're basically as if, when you look back at a holiday and you go into your memory box in your mind and you remember all of the good things that happened, the same when you perhaps have a breakup and you kind of go back as if it was a movie and you visualize and you remember all of the good things that happened. Know that Instagram is full of that because it's full of the good moments. So if it's filled with all of the good moments, it's like opening a gift box and just ta-da, like it's all gifts, it's all the good things. You're not going to see the bad things usually anyway, right? So I think just know that when you go onto someone's profile and are like, oh my God, their life is so perfect. Is it? Is there such a thing as a perfect life? Yes, they might have a beautiful location. Yes, they might have a beautiful home. Yes, they might have a beautiful relationship. You don't know the whole story. And I think we need to understand that you never know somebody else's whole story when you go onto their profile, because at the end of the day, it's just a profile. It's an Instagram profile. So how are you going to know that everybody else's life is perfect, but yours isn't? It's just, there's no such thing. That's a Barbie world, and you're not in a Barbie world. We're in normal human life, and nobody else's life is perfect. So I think just remember that every time you step into social media, and just lay off it in the morning. Like the first thing that you wake up, you're not going to go onto social media. Okay, because it's triggering off a stress response. And we don't want that. We want to actually fill our own cup as opposed to just empty it. So remember that as well. The first thing that you wake up in the morning, you fill your own cup. You don't step into the social media world because it's full of highlights and it's going to make you believe that your life is not good enough, that you're not good enough, that things aren't good enough, that your relationships aren't good enough, that your travels aren't good enough. So we really want to remember that. Okay. I know I'm giving the facts straight away today, but it's needed. Okay. Number two, difficult to be realistic, right? So it can be difficult to be realistic regarding what to expect from our surroundings and regarding what to expect from our relationships and friendships. Sometimes it can be a little bit of an unrealistic world if we're looking at Barbie Land, if we're looking at the Kardashians, if we're looking at other things. And suddenly you're kind of like stepping off your phone. You're like, hello, this is not what my life looks like. Help, SOS, my life is in shambles. It's most likely not. And if it is, please do your mindset work, please do your inner work, do therapy, do coaching, do all of the bits, things, both. So do your work, right? If things are in shambles, then you need to do your own inner work. But know that it's not necessary to look at things that are not necessarily in your life now and set realistic expectations for your partner. For example, if he doesn't have a Pandora box every time that you come home, or like anything that you can think of, that doesn't mean that your relationship is in shambles. Okay, just because you're not getting the same thing every single day that you see somebody else getting, then that's okay. You're actually fine. Most likely you're fine. Now, if your relationship is not great, fine. Like work on it. Maybe, just do what you need to do. But you don't have to compare yourself to those people who have all of the things that you desire. Okay, so there's a difference between manifesting and having your desires and actually just like frustrating yourself constantly every day because you're looking at other people's things and travels and homes and you're comparing yourself all the time and it's making you feel like crap. So there's a difference between that. Okay, we need to have an abundance mindset and see what all of the beautiful things that are around us as well. All right. Number three, not everything is as it seems. I think I tapped into it, but let's be honest, you don't know the whole story behind somebody else's profile. At the end of the day, it's just a profile, right? So when you see pictures, when you see the highlights, when you see that they're going out having dinners in beautiful restaurants, what was happening before in their day? Probably not the same, right? So it's not like they're just constantly living in like a high. There's also, speaking of living on a high, there is a negative dark side about constantly getting all of these like quick pleasures, right? So there's like any addiction is just, constant and just it's like you need more. when you go on to social media and you see people who are constantly in pleasure mode, right? Like, where is the kind of grounding? Where is the kind of grounding? And in terms of that, you looking at that all the time, that's kind of like your pleasure, like your eyes are looking at like pleasure all the time, right? Those pleasure kind of situations, that's kind of an addiction as well. So just remember that as well, because like it's like being in a casino and just constantly seeing things that you want and just like going for more, and just like refreshing. So just be mindful of the use of social media and just like how much you're scrolling, how much you're looking at people's lives, like the things that you desire. There's a thing, again, there's a difference between manifesting and like having your vision board and constantly just like triggering yourself with looking at what you want and what you wish you had, and then kind of like going back into your life and being like, I don't have anything. Okay, because that's not true. Oh yeah. Okay, so this is a really interesting one that I actually made a post on before, and it is so true. And this was me giving the facts. My own example was like my travels in Central America, right? So what I did was naturally, just as you do, like go on travels with my ex and just like, like I'm going to live my best life now and all of that jazz. That trip was 90% misery. Like I kid you not. Like there was pictures that looked like, absolutely stunning, like your usual just like beautiful travel photos because my ex had a beautiful camera and all of this stuff. And like my friends were like, wow, I'm so jealous. My family were like, wow, I'm so jealous. Everybody else was jealous but me because this trip was misery. Like there was arguments all the time. I was going through, I won't go into it, but it was a really, really, really dark period of my life where like certain things had happened one after the other. And, I was in a really, really low point of my life. And it just goes to show, like, when I came back, I was like, I was literally like, that was literally the start of like the worst of like my eating disorders and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, no, like, that is not it. And that's when I realized, wow, we see things all the time. We're like, oh, but I thought you were doing great. Oh, but I thought your relationship was fantastic. I thought those travels were amazing. Like, I was so jealous and all of this stuff. And you just don't know. You literally haven't a clue what is going on. Right. So that's a perfect example of like someone living their best life. Like, I'm so jealous, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly you find out that not so much. Now, obviously, it's not always the case, but you need to be super mindful and aware that where a world seems perfect, it might really be completely and entirely imperfect, let alone anything else that's worse than that. So be very mindful when you're scrolling, when you're looking at your friends' pictures, when you're looking at anybody else's pictures, because at the end of the day, it's a grid. It's like, here's the highlights, here's my beautiful moments, here's snapshots of beautiful locations. And that's what it is. Okay. So that is what it is and nothing else. Another thing is be very intentional of with what you expose yourself to and decide how you're going to view things with what perspective. So really deciding if you're looking at, your dream body, like somebody's really lean and toned and thick and all of this stuff, and you're just looking at the ideal locations, the ideal situations, things like that, right? Be very intentional with who you follow, because if you're following accounts that are triggering you, then hello, Bob's your uncle. Like, of course, you're going to be triggered all the time. Whereas if you're being intentional and following, for example, like the mindset people that actually are supportive as opposed to like forceful about goals, I have nothing to say about that. Um, really people who have that kind of light energy about them, I think that makes such a huge difference. Because if you have people like I love Tony Robbins, like I really do, but I don't follow any of his stuff because if I see it, I'm like, it sounds like somebody's putting a fire up my body, right? So it's like I really just want to go about my day and not have somebody else telling me what to do and kind of shouting, So be quite intentional with, not just following people because everybody else is, but following people that have supportive energy and make you feel good when you're on the page, not when they make you feel like crap. Right. So be intentional about what you follow, what you listen to with podcasts and things like that. what you expose yourself to, because that's, at the end of the day, that's your energy, your time and space, and what's more expensive than that, so being very aware of that. And then, just having that kind of filter mode of like, okay, what I see is what I see. It doesn't necessarily mean I know everything about that. It doesn't necessarily mean I know what is happening in their lives. It doesn't necessarily mean that my life is any less fun than that, is any less adventurous than that, is any less than that. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing worse than that person. So really diving deep into, how does this make me feel when you're following someone or when you're associating yourself with an account? How does this make me feel from my heart space in my body? How does it make me feel? Does it make me feel light? Does it make me feel envy? And just really exploring through that envy, because envy is just an emotion, right? It's kind of like a state. So what do you do with emotions? Emotions, just notice them and allow them to just pass through, right? And then the other side is, if something is making you anxious, if something is putting you in that state where it doesn't feel good anymore, then really reflect on, what am I now desiring to let go of? What is not resonating with me anymore in terms of social media? Is it that I don't want TikTok anymore because it's just very fast? Is it that I don't want to follow certain accounts on Instagram? Is it that I want a digital detox week? And just kind of asking yourself those things every now and then, because just because everyone else is doing something, it doesn't mean you also need to do it. I think being super aware of, I don't need to go into an app every hour, for instance, every 2 hours. I can limit it to this amount. I can limit it to the evening, or I can limit it to 2 days a week, or I can, slowly kind of deciding and choosing how you want things to be. And, just noticing how you feel when you compare yourself to others as well. So, noticing what's coming up, because that will help you to see, okay, well, this is how I'm feeling in reaction to what I'm seeing. Do you see? So, it's like you being in control of what's happening in your body, in your mind, and your entire being. And in conclusion, I would say basically what you see is highlights, right? Just like the highlights in my hair, they're just highlights, right? It's not like it's the day-to-day life. It's not like you see everything that's happening. What you see is highlights and not the overall story. So that means you don't know the entire story. You're just seeing the highlights on social media, and you don't have to compare yourself to highlights, because at the end of the day, you have highlights in your life too, right? So, what is there to compare yourself to? What is putting so much pressure on you? What is making you feel anxious when you go on social media? And just notice your inner talk. What is your entire mind and body saying to you? Is it that I don't have enough? Is it that I wish I had their lives? Be very aware of what comes up for you, and just choose wisely. Choose who you follow wisely. Choose who you listen to wisely. And just know that it's all highlights. All right, so we're going to leave it at that, because I really wanted this to be a quick episode for you to reflect on, so that you can kind of journal on, perhaps seeing what is no longer serving you, what is no longer making you feel good in terms of social media, and exposing yourself to certain things. And yeah, just being more self-aware, I think, is really good for us, and maybe even doing a little gratitude check-in. Of course, I would say this about, okay, what is going really well in my life at the moment? What am I really proud of? Like, what has happened recently that has really made me feel good? And really noticing everything that you have around you, because I guarantee you that there is a lot of abundance in your life. And comparison kind of steals that sometimes. It steals that sense of satisfaction from within us. And I think it's good to bring it back by just like holding moments throughout the day to hold appreciation for things, to really embody that state of appreciation and being like, wow, like actually I've come really far from this. I've done this. I feel like this now, and I'm growing. right? I'm growing, and I don't necessarily always have to look at what everybody else is doing and how quickly they're going and what their bodies look like, right? Like, do your own progress, like, focus on your own progress, focus on you, not on them. Like, you don't always have to see what everybody else is doing. You don't always have to see the wins of everybody else, which is great to celebrate, but also celebrate you and shift that focus back onto yourself, because that's going to make a huge difference in your life. Okay. So we will leave it there, my loves. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I will see you soon. I love doing these sort of podcast episodes and vlogs, because it really helps me to also kind of remind myself of the things that are real and that are not, and just of the things that are really important. And also, I love sharing this message with you. So thank you for watching and listening, and I will see you in the next one.